Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG. Now, the year is rushing to an end. By God, it's almost Christmas. I've still got some shopping to do. But one thing that we can do is have a look back at some of my favourite cards for Cube from 2022. Now, there's been quite a number of cool sets out there. We had Kamigawa, we had Capenna, we've had 2 on Dominaria now, as well as some cool supplemental products, which has led to a lot of cool cards being printed in this year. Today, I'm going to be going over kind of my top 5 favourite. These probably won't be the best or the powerful, but they're the ones I've kind of enjoyed the most or just had the most experience with and see them do dumb and cool things. Before we get into this proper, it's probably worth me going over some honorable mentions, just ones that I know are very strong, but they haven't clicked with me, I guess, as it were. First up, we have the completed cycle of the 5 Triomes from New Capenna. Now, there is an argument that these could be at the number 1 slot, just because of the impact that the Triomes have had to Cube. Since the full cycle has been printed, I've not had a bad mana base, basically. It has just made getting there so much easier. I've had some janky 4 or 5 colour decks and not had an issue at all, and I think the Triomes is a big part of that. Maybe this is a hot take or not, I'm not sure, but in Cube, I generally consider these as good as Shot Clans. You obviously have your Alpha Beta Duels, then you have your Fetches, then the argument of what's next best between Shocks and Triomes, I think is there's definitely an argument there. Obviously, the Shocks coming into play untapped is better, but the fact that these just so easily splash, and the fact that there's just more of them around, for the 2 colours you need, there are more around in the cube, so you're more likely to see them and more likely to just have better mana, basically. With some of the 3 or 4 colour decks I've been able to run this year because of these, having 1 Triome just does so much work. With 1 fetch, you can just fix like 90% of your deck and you just have it there. These are really, really strong and these are really, really good. The main reason they're not on my list is because they came out in Ikoria, we've seen the first half, we know what they can do. Would feel a bit disingenuous to be like, these are the best new cards for this year, because they're kind of cards from 2 years ago, just completed. But there we are. 2 other cards I want to talk about is White Plume Adventurer and Seasoned Dungeoneer. Now, these are honorable mentions, primarily because I have not tested them yet. I definitely slept on these cards, but have seen them doing some very dumb things. I think it was specifically when my wife went to Italy recently and smushed face with them in Vintage and Legacy, that was kind of like, oh, maybe I should be paying attention to these just a little bit more. From some of the feedback I've seen online, these look to be very strong. I'm going to be testing these soon, but it's kind of a bit disingenuous for me to put them on my list because I haven't tested them. I'm expecting these to be good because of the numbers that they're putting up in older formats, but again, honorable mentions at this point. And then finally, 2 last cards that would be on my list if I was just doing it out of power level. However, I found them just to be a bit mid-rangey good stuff, and that's Fable of the Mirror Breaker and the Wandering Emperor. Now, these are very strong cards. I have definitely lost to them in Cube this year. The reason they're not on my list proper is they are like mid-rangey, value-y, good stuff cards. They are both very strong. Both of them are at least 2 for 1s just in 1 card. That is really good. In mid-rangey cubes, I think these are some of the strongest. But mid-rangey cards are kind of a dime a dozen. And again, if this was just power level-wise, definitely Fable of the Mirror Breaker would be on there. Wandering Emperor, probably. It is a very strong card. But this is my list. I'm kind of going for the ones that I've enjoyed the most this year. So, kicking off with the list proper, at number 5 we have Chaos Defiler. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with everyone. The Warhammer 40k product this year was quite unashamedly my favourite set. I thought it was just awesome. It captured like the flavour, mechanics were awesome, and just some of the cards were just really, really cool. And of all the cards printed in that product, this is probably my favourite. It's another card that is printed for multiplayer, kind of like the initiative cards I was mentioning earlier, that is fair in multiplayer, but in one-on-one, it gets a bit broken open. Because that ability on it, it's not target. It's basically, the way it's worded is you choose an opponent's creature. You don't target it. So it's like a council's judgment. So it gets around things like hexproof, or it can kill like True Name Nemesis. The fact that this does this when it enters the battlefield and leaves, and is a 5/4 body, that is an artifact that you can kind of Goblin Weld back in or cheat into play, is just really, really strong. Like, because of cards like this, it's given Goblin Welder like a second life in my cube. And in general, I think the Grixis Welder strategy has just become very interesting. Like, I'm keeping an eye on some of the Canadian Highlander decks being built around like the Welder style stuff now to kind of see how I can make that work in cube. And however it works out, I think that Chaos Defiler will be a cornerstone of that archetype. It'll be one of the strongest cards. So, love it. Had to be on the list. Number 5, it is. At number 4, we have Tenacious Underdog from Streets of New Capenna. Now, I do love me an aggressive black creature that can recur itself again and again, and this is possibly one of the strongest. Definitely one of the best ones that we've seen in a little while. Why I really like this is, firstly, it's a 2-mana 3/2. That is just a very strong aggressive body, and is actually better than a lot of the other ones that you see out there. A lot of them are kind of 2-mana 2/1s. Okay, this is a 2-mana 3/2 base rate, which is awesome. The fact as well that the Blitz ability, it is a bit costly. It is like 2 black is a actual cost. But with that, there is no other downside. A lot of the other ones, like a creature has to have attacked, or you have to have like 1 or less cards in hand, or you have to have like another zombie. And the fact this is just 2 black, pay 2 life, it comes into play with haste, attacks for 3. No matter how it dies that turn, if it dies in combat or if you sacrifice it because of the Blitz thing, you then draw a card as well. So it's basically giving the aggro deck something to do with its mana. It's giving you a recursive threat that you can kind of keep trundling into your opponent, while also digging you for something more permanent to do, like to draw you into a more impactful kind of 3 or 4 drop or even a 5 drop, something like that. It's just been a really good card. I have thoroughly enjoyed it in every deck I have played this year. Whenever I've seen it, it goes in like aggro, it goes in aristocrats. It's even kind of alright in control, as a way of just kind of pushing damage through, like after a board wipe, that kind of thing. And the control decks love the card draw as well, to kind of, again, to fine you to the actual win condition. I really like this card. I think they're good. We are now at a point where there are enough recursive black aggressive creatures that we don't actually have to play them all now. That is a nice situation to be in. There's also some uncommon ones. I still want them to like print like 1 every set, just so we kind of get a bit of variety. We can kind of tailor it a bit more, just rather than, okay, here is the wedge of them. But yeah, Tenacious Underdog, awesome card. I had to be on the list. That's why it is number 4. At number 3, we have a card that's only been in my cube for a couple of drafts, but I've been immediately impressed and immediately liked the way it's played and kind of the game style that it leads to, and that is Saw in Half from Unfinity. This is such a unique effect and such a weird card. Even though it is like not silver border, as it were, it still kind of feels like one, but it has the power level and also, fortunately, the rules text behind it to make it actually work in like regular drafts. In the first cube it was in, it immediately comboed off and won the game in a way I was not expecting. That was extremely cool. Just on a value scale, it's obscene. Like, you can like Saw in Halfing any of the evoke creatures that you can play for free, or just any ETB effect, or even like an attack effect, just so you can get 2 of them. Like, this is where the Grave Titan is just extremely good. Like, you should be winning those games so quickly. Like, the fact it also has the flexibility to even save one of your creatures. If your opponent Doomblades your creature, you can just saw it in half and get 2 of them. There shouldn't really be any bad creatures in a cube you're drafting, so sawing them in half is going to lead you to get something good. Like, none of them just kind of come in and do nothing, really. So a large portion of the time, you're going to be happy having 2 creatures. There could definitely be a bit of recency bias, which is why it's made it this highly on the list. But I just like the idea that people can find cool things to do with it. Like, it's such a unique and interesting card that for as long as it's in my cube and as long as other new cards come into it, people are going to find interesting and cool ways to interact with it. And that's a really nice place for a cube card. Like, it's going to keep being fresh again and again, which is why I really like it. I think this is going to be one that's going to be in my cube for quite a while and is going to be super impactful and is going to lead to a lot of cool and interesting stories, which is why it's on the list. So at number 2, we have another card that's only been in, again, for a couple of drafts, because this one was only printed in Brothers War right at the end of the year, and it is Third Path Iconoclast. So unlike a lot of the other cards on this list, and even some of the honorable mentions, this has not been tested anywhere near to as fuller an amount. But there are times when you just read a card and know that it's going to be good. The fact this is a young Pyromancer that triggers off of any non-creature spells and also makes 1/1 artifacts is just really dumb. There are so many decks in any power of cube that can run this that want it. And because this is an uncommon, this would be the most included card in any cube of anything we've mentioned on this list. It will just go in so many cubes and it will be really, really good. This will be a strong card in a Peasant cube. It will also be a strong card in the Mitgo Vintage cube. That is how good this is. Is it in the vast majority of cubes is like a Spells Matter in some way form of deck or an artifact deck, or maybe the cube has both of those. This fills that gap. It kind of crosses both. Like, this can go in an artifact deck. The 1/1 artifacts that you make your constructs bigger. It makes your Tolarian Academy tap for more mana. If you're a Spellslinger deck, just giving yourself that board state like the Pyromancer does is just so impactful, and just having another one of these is going to be really, really good. So that's why, even though this hasn't been tested that much, it's so high on my list. It just does everything that people want it to do. So, at number 1, we have another card from the Streets of New Capenna. That set actually had quite a few bangers for Cube, more than I was initially expecting to find. But, at number 1, we have Ledger Shredder. This has just been such a strong and repeatedly good card. I think this might be the most winningest card of any of the new cards from this year that I've seen in my cube. And by that I mean it has just shown up in the most decks that have gone 3-0 in my cube. And face value, it doesn't look that strong, but just the fact that it effectively goes in any blue deck. I don't think there is one blue deck that wouldn't be happy running this. Like, if you're a blue-based control deck, this can come down, hold down the board, and dig you to that next answer with that connive trigger, or become your win con if you just put enough counters on it and protect it for long enough. Similarly with tempo. Again, you can protect it while bouncing your opponent's stuff. This just gets bigger and holds down the board. In combo decks, this also, again, helps you dig to find your combo pieces. Even in, Reanimator, the fact that it can put stuff into the graveyard is fantastic. It's almost a looter in that respect, while also being a decent flying blocker that, again, can become your backup win condition. Unlike Fable of the Mirror Breaker and the Wandering Emperor, only certain kind of mid-rangey decks want those cards. I think the power level of these three, so Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Wandering Emperor, and Ledger Shredder, as a raw card, is there. They are comparable. But it's just this goes in more things. Only kind of a mid-rangey value deck really wants Fable of the Mirror Breaker or the Wandering Emperor. They could be your top end in a aggro deck, but you'd probably just rather have another aggressive, hasty, low drop creature. Ledger Shredder isn't going to be a super high pick in a draft, but when it comes around to you and you're in blue, you are going to happily slam dunk it and know that you have a card for your deck that is going to do a lot of work. And I think that's the best way of describing why it had to be my number 1 for the year. So, thank you very much, everyone. That was my list. 2022 has been a cool year for Cube. There's been a lot of interesting cards and a lot of new things out there that we can do. 2023 looks fun already. We have the kind of Phyrexian sets coming up. We have the Lord of the Rings set, which I'm actually quite up for. The fact it's a modern power level means we're probably going to get some cool cards for that. But anyway, that brings an end to 2022. Do let me know down in the comments the cards that you've enjoyed most in Cube this year. Would be good to see them, to see if there's any ones that I've missed or any ones that I've overlooked. It'd be really helpful. But until next time, please like, share, and subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.